Wasabi guys, welcome back to another Commander video. As always, if you appreciate these, please subscribe to the channel. We have a new Commander option for the upcoming June set, Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate, Zevlor Elturel Exile. This 4-mana Grixis color Tiefling warrior is a 4/2 with haste, and a pretty strong ability that says pay 2 and tap. When you next cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets a single opponent, or a single permanent an opponent controls this turn, for each other opponent choose that player or a permanent they control, copy that spell, and the copy targets the chosen player or permanent. But wait, I know what you're all about to say. He didn't forget, did he? Or he didn't know about the errata? Yes, the errata text will say only a single opponent or only a single permanent, which means that if you were using any kind of card with different modes where you could target several things, before the errata this would count for something like Mystic Confluence, where you could target several things as long as it targets a single opponent or a single permanent in opponent controls, it would still copy it. But now that it says only, means that you can only copy instants and sorceries if they specifically target just one thing or one player. It's a bit of a bummer, but believe it or not, this is still going to be a pretty powerful commander. And I'd like to point out another year, another Dungeons & Dragons crossover, we get yet another 4-mana Tiefling commander option that looks to be pretty powerful. I will say that Prosper had the benefit of doing something brand new, whereas Zevlor is kind of an addition to an already oversaturated spellslinger strategy. Still gonna get a lot of players, but I just don't think it's gonna have the same kind of impact that Prosper did, having all the play from exile synergies, having all the treasure token synergies, and being really the first commander where you could do both really well. And also take into account that the 2 mana for the activated ability will take it out of the 4 mana sweet spot, because you're not just paying the 4 mana to get the commander out there, you also have to factor in that cost, meaning that it's going to take you at least another turn to be able to use that ability. So let's talk about the obvious ways that you can synergize with this. Playing targeting removal is probably what you're going to be doing anyway. The great thing about Zevlor is that these are also going to be targeting all of your other opponents or their permanents. Again, so long as it's just one target. You have things like Rapid Hybridization in blue, Chaos Warp in red, Bedevil, and a lot of targeting removal in black. Expect to see a lot of these in those decks. They were probably going to be in most Grixis decks anyway. What's really interesting, what you can really take advantage of Zevlor with, is discard. And not just any discard, but the targeting discard that's very precise in what you're able to force an opponent to discard, using something like Thoughtseize. Doesn't have to be Thoughtseize, you're going to be losing some life off of that, of course. But in the same vein of Thoughtseize, we have Thought Erasure and cards like Thought Erasure, where once you copy them, you get each other opponent, making them discard a specific card. It's always great for payoffs. But then you have ones that are a little bit more damaging, like Blightning, where it's not about discarding a specific card, but rather discarding 2. They're also dealt 3 damage. I think that's a great card that you don't see in Commander. That's the potential here. If you were to ask me where I see Zevlor really succeeding, it's when you decide to go down the hand destruction path, because you don't see these cards in Commander as often. You do see them in Standard, you do see them in Modern, anything that's a 60 card, 1v1 format. These are much, much stronger. So Zevlor basically says, let's try to make these for Commander. And it really does work with something like Waste Not, because if you need card draw, you can force an opponent to discard a non-creature non-land. If you need zombies, you can make them discard creatures, and depending on the spell, not a lot of spells will make them discard land specifically, but you could also get that mana. Other payoffs are still going to be there for discard, like Liliana's Caress and Sangromancer. This probably isn't the first thing that comes to mind when you think about being able to copy spells at target, but adding this onto a lot of other discard spells and other discard payoffs, it really does have potential to be quite powerful. Going into more of the value side of things, you're going to love what you're able to copy, and you're going to notice there are a lot of spells that the intention isn't to hurt your opponents, but it's to have a spell, it's to have an instant or sorcery that targets an opponent for any reason at all. Of course, with Intuition, you're actually getting the benefits, not about hurting your opponent. You search up for any 3, they put 1 into your hand, the other 2 go into your graveyard. Copy that for each of your other opponents. You'll get to search for 6 more cards and get 2 more back to your hand. It's a very expensive one, but if you can afford it, Intuition is going to be very strong with this commander. Siphon Insight's a newer card for Midnight Hunt. Hasn't seen as much play as it probably should, and I think that's because it's not a red-black card, but it's still going to be very strong. Again, if you can copy it, you're really only paying 4 mana to get 1 card off the top of each of your opponent's libraries, being able to play them. You can flash it back so you get extra usefulness out of it, and Praetor's Grasp is, again, very brutal. If you're able to copy this for each of your other opponents, you could get the best card out of all of their libraries, and being able to play that means you could win. A lot of scary potential there. And continuing with what I was talking about with intuition, we have other cards that the goal isn't necessarily to hurt your opponents. I think going into building around this commander, you're probably going to be distracted by, well, how can I hurt everyone? Gitaxian Probe is a brilliant example of how you can think outside the box. You're targeting them so you get some other added benefit that wasn't originally within the card's design. So for 2 life and 2 mana, that's the cheapest that you can play this and copy it. You'll be able to look at each of your opponent's hands, and then you'll be able to draw 3 cards. You're taking cards that aren't typically seen in casual decks, and you're making them stronger in a multiplayer format. Keep in mind, Gitaxian Probe does see competitive EDH play, but that's just because a lot of those commander players want to get through their decks quicker. In casual EDH, this isn't nearly as strong. Other cards like Snap, which could be treated like removal, you're taking bounce removal, which isn't typically strong in this type of multiplayer format, and you're multiplying it by 3. So you could bounce 3 creatures to their owner's hands, and then untap 6 lands. I think that is pretty incredible. And Jeska's Will may in fact be one of the best spells to come out of Commander Legends because it's in every red deck. It is a card with different modes, but it is a card with only one mode that targets, and you are just targeting one opponent. So if you are able to copy this, you will get both of those modes, which is a lot of red mana and a lot of cards that you can play from exile. Now we get to talk about the go big or go home cards, and a lot of scary, frightening potential here. Not only could you focus on the discard strategy and make that strong, I think you could also do the same for Mill, although I don't think it's going to be as easy and even more hated. You could use something like Traumatize that only targets one player, and multiply that by 3, hit all of your opponents. Cruel Ultimatum is a great card that used to see a ton of commander play that doesn't really see as much now. It's a 7 mana spell, you pay 2 more, so 9 total. Have each opponent sacrifice a creature, discard 3 cards, lose 5 life, and then you'll get your benefit off of this 3 times. So you'll get to return 3 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand, you'll get to draw 9 cards, and then you'll gain 15 life. It's a lot of mana, but that benefit is worth it. And if you really wanted to be hated and Mill wasn't enough for you, Worst Fears is one of the most brutal black spells ever made. For 8 mana plus 2, you'll be able to do this for each opponent, so you'll get to control all of their next turns. That's pretty disgusting. So that is a taste of what's to come in June with Zevlor Elturel Exile. A very interesting commander option with a ton of potential, although I will say that the fact that we have a ton of spellslinger strategies already, we have a lot of commander options that just came out in New Capenna that work well with spellslinger. We weren't really desperate for more in the strategy, so I think just focusing on the instants and sorceries that target only a permanent or a single opponent really does help to narrow it down a bit, because otherwise it's just going to blend in with a lot of other strategies. Maybe not quite as creative as Prosper Tomebound, but this 4-mana Tiefling Warrior is no doubt going to be a popular commander. So if you enjoyed the video, again, please do subscribe. Thank you all for joining us so far. We are almost to 35,000 subs. Commander Void here. I will see you all next time.